We're expecting Vice President Kamala Harris to announce her running mate in the next 24 hours ahead of her battleground state blitz with her VP pick that kicks off in Philadelphia tomorrow. She reportedly met with at least 3 finalists: Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly yesterday at her Naval Observatory residence in D.C. Meanwhile, Maria spoke with Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator JD Vance, on Sunday Morning Futures about the recent criticism surrounding his candidacy. Watch.
I actually take their criticism as a badge of honor. Of course, the media is going to attack the people they fear the most. And I don't come from inside the Beltway, Maria. You know, I grew up as a poor kid. I didn't come from a political family or a wealthy family. I worked my way through college, through the Marine Corps, and eventually landed as Donald Trump's running mate. I think that's a story that a lot of normal Americans can empathize with.
And I guess the Democrats see all of that as weird. What do you say about this new strategy to call you weird from the Democrats?
I think that it's a lot of projection. I'm doing this because I want to be a good public servant who fixes the problems of the Democrats. They can call me whatever they want to. The middle school taunts don't bother me. What bothers me and what offends me is what Kamala Harris has done to this country.
Joining me now, Democratic strategist and HEG president Fred Hicks, and Pollster and WPA Intelligence CEO Chris Wilson. And Chris, I want to start with you. Your reaction to what JD Vance told Maria yesterday.
Well, I think Vance's willingness to take on Republicans as well as Democrats does show he's not beholden to Washington interests. I think he's done a very good job focusing on Harris's record rather than engaging in personal attacks, and it demonstrates the strategy that he understands and is focused on, which is appealing to policy-minded voters. And I also like his emphasis on prosperity and peace under Trump. I mean, that's kind of where his message went. It wasn't a soundbite, but I think that resonates with voters concerned. Your last segment was all about the economy, and then you're going to be talking about national security, and those are the things he's talking about. So I think JD Vance is on message and doing a good job in terms of appealing to voters and pushing the criticisms aside.
So you don't think that he's a drag on the campaign?
No, I really don't. Not at this point. It's too early to tell something like that. I mean, ultimately, until Harris names her vice president, we won't know kind of how they match up. And I think at this point, he is he's a help in some states that in which his background really does matter.
So, Fred, you say that all of the different vice presidential choices for Harris have strengths and weaknesses. What are you saying, and what are you seeing?
Well, you know, first I want to say that I think that JD Vance misses the whole point, that we're not saying that he himself is weird. We're saying that his positions, calling childless women catless or women and referring to people who don't have children as they should have less voting power, and just really his anti-woman message is weird. But aside from that, with respect to the vice presidential candidates in front of Vice President Harris at this point, I think that there are a number of candidates who are very strong. And the thing that the vice presidential pick will indicate, as it did on the Republican side, is it will give us a view or a window into how the candidate sees this race. I think when former President Trump selected Vice President or JD Vance to be his vice presidential candidate, that indicated that he felt very confident, and he had every right to do so at the time, because he was up in every swing state poll, and he was up in the national polls, and he was raising all the money. So he picked someone he thought was, well, he didn't really need to appeal to the middle because things are going well. And so I think what we'll see from Vice President Harris will indicate how she sees the race at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly a lot has happened, and it's only been 1 month and change since that debate, to your point. And the campaign for both has really shifted. The candidate shifted on the Democratic side. Yeah. So let's talk about the swing states. Harris and Trump are basically near deadlock in the battleground states. So Harris is leading Trump by only 2 points in Nevada. In Wisconsin, Georgia, and North Carolina, Trump is leading Harris. Now, the two are tied in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. Fred, I want to go to you first on this, because this does influence, I would think, her VP pick, especially if it is Josh Shapiro, which does seem to be the leading contender right now.
So the data is really interesting. Kamala Harris has been the nominee, or the presumptive nominee, for about 3 weeks now. And over that period, she's raised about $300 million. She has gained about a point a week in the polls, and she has signed up over 200,000 volunteers. And so I think by any objective measure, she has the momentum. She knows that. We Democrats know that. And I think most importantly, Donald Trump knows that, and he's been behaving quite, erratically on the national stage, including here in Georgia just last week, the other day, when he attacked a very popular governor. So with that being said, I think when we look at these polls, and we have to understand that when Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee 3 weeks ago, she was behind in every single swing state. And to get to the point now where in Georgia some polls have her tied, and in the other swing states we're seeing very similar kind of numbers, that says to me that she now has the luxury to try to expand the map. And so while I think Josh Shapiro does have the inside track, I'm hearing a lot of noise and a lot of conversations about Governor Walz out of Minnesota, someone who would be very appealing to the left, someone who would be very appealing to African American minority voters and to younger voters.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. That if she picks Walz, that signals that she is still leaning into those progressive stances and policies, which is not the moderate, message that I think they're trying to go for, because you are now into the general election. And Chris, I want to pick up on something else, because Fred mentioned the electoral map. I mean, look, this all does come down to, again, Arizona, Georgia, but I want to ask you about Michigan, Chris, because what does the data show you coming out of Michigan? That is, in particular, the Muslim, the Palestinian voices out of Michigan have been very, very critical of President Biden. How does she handle that? Because Michigan at this point is where we're seeing a neck-and-neck race, but that progressive left could come back to hurt her in Michigan.
Yeah, and what you could define as progressive left, I define as a portion of it as an anti-Semitic voice that is really I think is making big waves to try and keep Josh Shapiro, who is, of course, a Jewish descent, and trying to keep him off the ballot. And that is unfortunate, and I think it's the sort of thing that has no place in American politics in either party, quite candidly. And so to see them have the kind of voice and the force they do, I mean, the fact that he served in the IDF has become a major issue with some of those voices out of Michigan. Is just, again, it has no place in politics, and it's unfortunate to see. I would also point out from an overall polling perspective that at this point in 2020, Biden and Harris had an 8-point lead over Trump and Pence. So the fact that it's a dead heat right now, I think, speaks very well for where Donald Trump is positioned. But the thing that really stood out for me on this poll, and this is more of a national thing than it is a Michigan issue, but it certainly affects Michigan because the economic issues there are dominant, and that is economic concerns. And Trump is still favored by voters on this issue. Again, your last segment was talking about the economic concerns right now and how it's hitting average people. Only 25% of people in the poll said they expect to be better off financially if Harris wins, compared to 45% for Trump. That is a big deal, and it matters. And nearly half of voters say President Trump's policies will make them financially better off. Only 20 points believe that 20 points would they say that they'd be better off. 6 points say with Harris would make them worse off. And so those are the kind of issues I think are making people decide. But I'll tell you the one thing that really stood out to me on the poll, and you mentioned the voices coming out of Michigan, is where this race is right now with Hispanics. And candidly, Harris has a lead, but it's only a 7-point lead right now. And if you think about that, it's 51 for Harris, 44 for Trump. Now, let's look at how Democrats have won Hispanics in the past. Biden won them by 33. Harris leads by 7. Clinton won them by 38. Harris leads by 7. Obama won them by 44. Harris leads by 7. We're looking at a complete shift of Hispanics in terms of their support for President Trump. And I think that is really the story coming out of this, and why you look at states like Nevada and Arizona, and that are closer, New Mexico, candidly, that didn't make it into, that's making its way into a swing state because of the policies that Donald Trump has taken on the border that are appealing to Hispanics. And that's why this race is closer than it was in 2020.
Yeah, and that's why Mark Kelly is up at the top of the list for vice president, because of the border. And, he's somebody that has really captured that audience in Arizona in particular. Well, we're going to know in the next 24 hours, gentlemen, who the choice is going to be, and then we'll have much more to talk about. Fred Hicks, Chris Wilson, great segment, guys. Thank you so much for being with me this morning.
And Joseph, explain first to the layperson the blockchain part of this and the role that Ethereum plays in all of it.
Hey, thanks for having me on. So the artist's name is Beeple, but with respect to Ethereum, essentially for millennia, all of our transactions have relied on centralized trust systems overseen by monarchs in nation states. Blockchain, which is a decentralized protocol technology, enables us to build more decentralized systems that don't require as much dependency on centralized intermediaries like governments, banks, and other organizations. Right. So Bitcoin brought decentralized money to the world, essentially a free market money system that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And Ethereum enables us to build better forms of money like like Bitcoin, but also efficiently create a wide variety of digital assets on much sounder, decentralized trust foundations.
So earlier in the week, the Federal Reserve System in America, the entire system was down. You couldn't wire anyone money. And, while there was no real panic per se, many say that was a good example of where maybe a blockchain system would have worked. In layman's and layperson terms, do you really believe that a blockchain is robust enough to actually take the place of the current system that runs the Federal Reserve?
Financial technology, especially in the Western world, is very robust. Layers built on top of that tend to be more corruptible by people. In terms of disruptive technology, generally a disruptive technology starts a little bit behind the incumbent technology, and because of the promise that the people see in it, eventually eclipses that incumbent technology by orders of magnitude. So currently I would say that that blockchain technology is on par with at its foundational level with the existing Western systems. But because it's natively digital, that sort of robustness is likely to move up the layers of the stack, so to speak.
All right. Let's get to Bipple and this art thing and the non-fungible tokens. And this is brand new to me, but I'm reading where some of these pieces have gone for $3.5 million. A piece that he sold not long ago went up 10 times in value already, sold for $6.6 million. It's just amazing. You're in the middle of all of this. What do you make of just how the whole crypto world is starting to dominate all the facets of our lives?
Well, first, it's important to point out that there is rampant asset inflation all around the world. There's much more money chasing the same number of goods and services, and protecting yourself involves finding things that will appreciate in value as quickly as money is depreciating, essentially. And so there's some of that involved. But also, this is a paradigm shift. We are thanks to COVID, thanks to sort of the end of a 70-year debt supercycle, where we're really running on fumes in terms of how our financial system and the global economy is constructed. And so the paradigm shift basically moves us in the direction of digitization of the entire economy, and digitization on top of hopefully a new trust foundation represented by decentralized protocol technology. So the people that are understanding that have been piling in for a few years and are now piling in much greater numbers. Institutionals are coming. Corporations are aligning their treasuries with the crypto tokens and making use of the blockchain technology in their business processes.
I think the key word you said there was the trust aspect of this. It feels like the technology is there, but the trust is gaining big time. Joseph, thank you very much.